Welcome to Voices for Impact, the podcast. Started during the COVID-19 pandemic and made in Syracuse, Voices for Impact is full of conversations with thought leaders from around the world that have made significant accomplishments in their lives and have gone through their own challenges, but have made it through those adversities and made positive impacts through their work. I'm your host, Danielle Mensing, and as a fundraiser for a nonprofit, I believe the most valuable tool you can give yourself is making a positive impact on others and your community. Every conversation is going to give you tools and tactics from entrepreneurs, athletes, artists, and change makers that will encourage you to develop a growth mindset and reimagine how you can find your purpose. Now let's get started. Welcome to Voices for Impact. My name is Danielle Mensing, founder of Voices for Impact, and today I am chatting with the three founders of NoBull Company, a modern media and event business that brings energy, humor, and life to business. We'll get to that in more detail shortly, but first I want to get to know the men behind it. John Timmerman.
Hi, how are you?
But John Timmerman is an entrepreneur and creator who is laser focused on building businesses and brands that allow for a flexible lifestyle. He's the CEO of Good Monster, a digital marketing agency, and co-founded Jackson Jovi, an athletic denim company, with his wife. Rob Schauger is the CEO and founder of Blueprint Leadership Development. Rob has spent the last 25 years focusing on sales, marketing, branding, and business development in the Central New York, Albany, and Saratoga markets. And then Al Kutri is the owner of AC Events and Entertainment, an event company in Syracuse, New York. And he is also the senior video producer for Auto Media. And you may recognize him as a saxophonist in the CNY band, the Mere Mortals. So thank you so much for having a conversation with me today, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
My first question is, what drives each of you to pursue the goals that you have with the businesses that you've created?
I'll jump in. So early, when I was younger, in my early 20s, it was the need to succeed, like the competitive, right? I was always into sports. I was always into, first it was team sports, then it was more aggressive sports like snowboarding and mixed martial arts. And I just kind of rolled through all of these things. So that it was a natural next progression challenge, if you will. But then entering into my 30s, it moved to family. So building a life for my family that is flexible, allows us to be financially free, make decisions that are sort of independent from what we have to do. So that's my sole driving force at this moment.
So for me, there's a pretty simple code that we live by, my wife and I, in that. So there's two things that are important. One is that we're giving back, and two is we have fun with everything that we do. Like if we're not giving and we're not having fun doing it, then I'm out. See you later. Gotta go by.
Yeah. For me, what drives me is freedom, like to always have my freedom. And if that means working 100 hours for myself versus 40 hours for someone else, then that's what it means. But I'm very passionate about maintaining my freedom and always being able to do what I want when I want, and live a happy life.
I love that. Those are all really great answers. What motivated you to start your own businesses?
My story started when I was 26. I was a personal trainer and sport performance coach for another company. And it was a brand new sport performance training facility in Richmond, Virginia. They were relatively new entrepreneurs, had just bought into this big complex, and I was one of the first strength and conditioning coaches. Well, I met a gentleman who named Frank Easterly that wanted one-on-one sport performance training specifically for golf. High-powered CEO, founder of his own company, and loved to play golf. And so he's flying around the world. He flies in, plays a bunch of rounds of golf, gets some training in, then flies out to his next, client meeting in Dubai or wherever it was at that particular time. So he said, hey, can you train me? I had never started a business before. I'd never even thought about starting a business, but I was sort of forced into it. I had to do all the technical stuff, like set up a sole proprietorship, like get a tax ID number, that kind of stuff. But as soon as he had me do that, I don't know what it was, honestly, but I just was like, oh, wait a minute. Like I can work for myself and I can grow this thing and create whatever I want, with very little limitations if I put my mind to it. And so I was a sponge towards Frank. And every time I actually think I should have paid him rather than him paying me, because I learned more from him than I feel like I actually trained him. But that was the first moment that allowed me to figure out what entrepreneurship was and really bought into the concept. And from there, it was, I don't know that I would ever been able to actually work for somebody long-term again.
Yeah, so I think for me, similar to the answer to your first question, so it's control of time and money so that we can continue to do the things that move us, right? So it's the giving and the serving and having fun.
Great.
And for me, what inspired me to start my own business was survival. I went and did my master's in business, which was, a lot of people said, go get your master's. They're going to be knocking down your door. Companies all over the world will be headhunting you because you'll be that marketable with your MBA. So that's what I did. And literally no one wanted to hire me because I spent 7 straight years in college and just went college. So I should have been a doctor for that much college, but companies were like, well, you don't have the experience. So I was going for jobs that the MBA was good for, but I didn't get hired because I didn't have the work experience. Mm-hmm. And then all the other jobs that I would have been able to be hired for, I was overqualified because of the MBA. So I was like, I could not get a job. And thankfully at the time, right after college, in that awkward phase of like, what am I going to do? I was playing a lot as a musician. So I was, I could live and pay my bills. But then it got to the point where, I was losing an identity. I was like, I have this degree and I have no job. Like, what am I doing? But I was also working for a local charity and doing all of their events. And I was doing events through music and all this other stuff. And then video production, I got involved in that on a side thing. And ultimately I said, this is what I do. Like, what am I doing every day? Turn that into something. Like, you already have a business. You just don't have a business card. Mm-hmm. So I was like, this is what you do. This is who you are. Make a business. And like, now you don't have to worry about being hired because this is it. So I formed a business out of like, this is who I am. Now I'm a business.
Yeah.
I was too hard to figure out, like, resume. Like, okay, here we go. Jumped right in.
So really at a certain point you knew, hey, I can take these talents that I have and make money off of it. So
yeah, I was totally out of
having that realization.
Yeah, I had no control over other people's decisions about my future. And I was like, well, this is not comfortable for me at all. But then then it clicked and I was like, no, I'm very much in control. And that was it. And I just grew it slowly but surely. And over a decade, here we are.
Yeah. Now, what is the best advice you've ever received?
Keep the flow. John, you go first.
Man, I don't have a really good memory for this kind of stuff. Like quotes or things people have told me. I don't know who gave it to me, but I know that my wife and I sort of live our marriage like this. And I feel like the three of us founders, we live our business marriage like this. And it is a really good concept to have. And it's honesty is our policy. So I can tell you that I'm a very honest person for good or bad. These guys can tell you I will never sugarcoat anything. I'll be completely honest. I'll be honest. Most importantly, I think to me is I'm honest with myself. I'm very unbiased with myself. And when I'm doing a shit job, like I will own up to it. And when I'm doing a good job, I'll own up to it. And I give the same to other people, again, for good or bad. But I feel like that was a piece of advice given to me at one point, is keep honesty as your policy. And it's something that I live my life and run my businesses by, with my employees at Good Monster, with these gentlemen, and with my wife and everybody else I have close ties with.
Yeah. So for me, it's, stay humble and remember where it is that you came from. For me as a believer, I've been knocked down a couple of pegs a few times. Be like, hey, let's come back down here a little bit and let's brush the chip off the shoulder and remember, how you got here and what you're doing. So to, just to stay humble and, carry that through and remember where it was we came from and how we got here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sort of with John, and I don't have a real like specific sort of game changing one liner of advice.
Al and I have a hard time listening to other people.
We do.
I said, Al and I have a hard time listening to other people.
Advice. Listen to me. Oh, what?
Yeah. No, I'm going the other way. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Right, Rob?
Yeah, especially me. They don't listen to a damn thing I say.
That's not true.
Coach. I would say the best advice I ever received is really, at all costs, pursue happiness. Really like just be very self-aware, and happiness first. And I know happiness is not, it's a choice, right? Like there's all sorts of things that come in life, but
Do you just realize it was honesty, humble, and happiness? The 3 H's.
Didn't even plan that. That's why we work so well together.
Quote card, Danielle, put it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's how I feel about that.
Now, what do you think is like the skill or characteristic you have, either individually or as a group together, that has helped you achieve your goals and dreams?
I think if I were to have a superpower, I think it's like perspective. It's my ability to see 2 things: ability and curiosity. Like I'm so curious to see other people's perspective that I have a hard time judging how other people feel or, actions that they take. Right. So I, on one hand, have that perspective enough to like have the empathy, but at the same time, it's served me well at Good Monster and helping other companies find their voice and connecting with consumers and helping to build the NoBull brand in a way that is attractive to people. So I think that is one thing that has helped me get to where I am. And I will say, I think one thing collectively, and obviously the guys can talk about this, but as a group, I think one reason that we work well together is that we've developed a level of trust in each other very quickly. And I don't know why that is. Because I've had other partnerships that haven't been like that. So whether it is humble, we're all humble. And we understand that at any given time, all of this can fall apart. Or at any given time, this could be a $100 million rocket ship. We don't, so I think our humbleness maybe has led to our trust, which has made this a really good fit.
Yeah. And so as the elder statesman of the group,
Coach.
So there's a great balance of energy and vision and steadfastness. So, I'm more at my age and a little bit older than these guys. I oftentimes have a tendency to pump the brakes from an experience level. Al pumps the brakes from a caution level, which keeps us grounded in a lot of areas. And John balances us out with vision and like, what do you mean I can't do that? Like, watch
John
me.
has no brakes.
Has no brakes.
And he'll go do it. And I'm like, and that expands my vision. Like, man, I would have been like, John's like, nope, I think we can.
John cut his own brake lines.
I'm like that kid with the bike you got to slam your feet down on the ground and like skid for a long time.
I love it. So you each balance each other out.
Yep.
Totally. For me, I think a strength that I have is I'm very, I would say elastic, in that I can pivot and change direction with, without a second thought. I'll be like, okay, let's do that then. If something's not going well, I'm not married to it. I don't get down on myself. If it's a failure, it's a failure. I have no fear of failure. I failed a bunch of times. I've started a bunch of businesses that were complete and, total failures. And it just doesn't bother me. Like, I'm just like, well, you make a joke, crack a joke about it and move on. And on to the next thing. And in terms of the team, I agree with what, John and Rob said, but the trust level and the balance is huge. I mean, I'm a control freak by nature, and like super micromanager, and a little bit nuts, you know what I mean? And like these guys, I don't know, something about it. I trust them. And like, there's been plenty of times that, you guys know, we've had uncomfortable moments of like, I don't know, I don't agree. You go back and forth, and then suddenly something clicks in where you're like, okay. And that's not from that's not from like a give up perspective. That's from like, no, I trust you guys. And I feel the freedom of letting go is a wonderful freedom for someone who's kind of a control freak.
Just to go back a little bit, you said that you don't mind failing and it doesn't bother you.
Correct.
How, John and Rob, like, do you have that same mindset? Because for me, it's really hard to let go of something and not, go back in my head and relive it 500 times. So what is some advice that you would have for people that like failure or challenges or going through adversity? Like, what advice would you have for somebody going through those things?
I think mine's probably 50% genetic makeup, because I have always been a risk taker since I was young. But the other 50% is always looking 3 steps ahead, and then doing that at parallel paths. So I don't create backup plans necessarily. Like, I don't have an elaborate backup plan of like, what if this doesn't work? But what I do in my mind is I fail in my mind somewhat naturally now. Like, I don't even do it consciously or like on purpose, but I'll say, okay, here's this thing we want to do. What are the possible bad outcomes? Let me work through what happens if those happen. Like everything. Like, okay, we're just hired 5 new people. What if this client leaves at Good Monster and all of a sudden we can't afford those 5 new hires? So how am I going to make sure that I don't have to turn around and let them go again? Oh, this is what I need to do. Da, da, da. And I do that really fast through my brain. And if something is glaring, like, whoa, I really need to pay attention to this, because if not, it's a bomb, then I'll focus some time on that. But quite often, and I see a lot of people run through this in their head, is they focus so much on the what ifs that they don't ever get a chance to develop the step 1 and 2 and 3 to even get in the same stratosphere as that what if. So then, they get sort of, what is it called? Analysis paralysis. And they never even get to that point. They wore themselves out of the first 3 steps, when in reality, the first 3 steps won't even get you to the point where you could have a big fail. So in terms of trying to overcome failures or deal with failures, just whether you're the type of person that does need to write it down and plan it out, or you're the type of person that can just run through it in your head, it's just a constant scale all the time. Do the benefits outweigh the risks? And am I willing to deal with the risk if the floor does fall out? Actually, this is a really good, it's not a quote, like a quotable quote necessarily, but something I heard Gary Vaynerchuck, who's our keynote speaker for NoBull 2020, say. He, Hudson Yards, I think, is the place where their office is. It's this multi $100 million, maybe even $1 billion complex that they built in New York City 3 or 4 years ago. And he goes, I didn't need that office. Like, that office, like, we were working out of a conference room 4 years ago of another company. I didn't need this office, but the move it makes it happy. It makes my staff happy. It made his staff happy to be right down where it was. the investor in that building was another investor of his company. So it was a relationship thing. And he goes, you know what? If my company blows up in the next year, I can foot the bill for the annual rent out of my own pocket. So I know that we're safe no matter what. Like, you know, if the company goes bankrupt, I'm not going to be on the hook for 12 months of rent. Right. So that was a quick, whether it was quick or not, that was a sort of risk versus reward and a quick backup plan for what if the floor falls out.
As cliche as it sounds, it's to fail forward. So don't get stuck in the misery of the failure. Figure out how you're going to get past it and move on. So maybe it's you're moving on and you're staying in the same lane that you're in, or maybe it's time to move to a different lane. But whatever you do, you need to move forward and keep having the forward momentum. Like, do not stop and get stuck and dwell on it. And if that means you're going to reach out to your inner circle and really just be honest and be humble and be like, hey, look, you know, I did some stupid stuff. It caused me some setbacks. Like, reach out to your friends and your confidants and your business partners and have that honest conversation. Don't sit and try to, like, you know, stuff it back down in and thinking it's just going to fix itself, because it's probably not.
Failure piece, you know, I tend to live in a very, like, you know, more on the emotional side of things. These guys know, like, I'm very, like, mental state, emotional, like, what does it all mean? Why are we all here kind of guy. And I think from a macro thinking, a business failure or a relationship failure or any kind of failure, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it sucks. There's a lot of disappointment there. There's all sorts of stuff. But if, you know, you're alive, you're healthy, it's not going to kill you. It's not going to end you. If you're super young or moderately young, I mean, Jesus, like, being 70 is still, like, young-ish, you know, like, it's still fairly young. So let's just say, regardless of age, like, failures do not end you. And if you can understand that, they just don't make a difference. Like, people forget them. They only have an impact really on you typically. And they just don't mean anything. Just keep going. Like, just put it behind you and, oh, that sucked. That was a failure. Say it out loud and on to the next thing. But it will not end you.
Those are some really great impact moments. So thank you for those
Sure.
3 pieces of advice. Let's talk about NoBull 2020. I just want to know, tell our viewers, how did you guys get together? How did this idea form? Go.
So today I've been on, like, I felt like the news circuit today. Like, this is like the 5th time that I've told the NoBull story. Just, it was one of those days. So I've tried to condense this down to, like, really short and to the point, but there's some things you just can't leave out because it deletes the humor piece of this. So I'll go as quick as I can. So last year I was working on developing my company with Blueprint Leadership Development, and I had an idea for a one-day event that I wanted to do. And I was sick and tired of business owners or entrepreneurs or, like, employees within an entrepreneurial mindset company going to these events, and it's just another cheerleading rah-rah session, right? Like, why can't we just go somewhere to where we can get tactical information on a Thursday afternoon, and Friday we go back to work and, like, we can freaking put it into motion and move the needle in our business. Not all week long we look forward to it. Thursday's here, it was great. Friday we're like, what do we just do again? And so I was pitching the idea of doing that in the Albany market. And I was told the leadership market and all of this stuff has really just become very overrated. And we don't think you could pull off something of this size with great success. So we're not saying no, we're just saying not right now. I'm like, okay. So I go to a guy who I know who will, like, you know, do just about anything, especially if you tell him he can't. And I said, hey, John, got an idea. He's like, sure, what's up? So I have the same idea. And he's like, look, I am super busy. You heard everything he's got going on. They were expecting their first child, 2 businesses. He's like, I am flat out. He says, but if it was something big, I'd find time to carve a little piece out and do what I can. Either way, you need a venue guy. I'm like, I don't know anybody. Do you? And he's like, yep, we should sit down and talk with Al. I'm like, who's Al? Well, I'll set it up. Enter the first meeting at Starbucks. Al walks in with his, his $1 million Hollywood smile,
Oh.
his hat on backwards. He sits down and we just start having a conversation, right? And so I'm telling the story and I'm watching. So John's heard it once, Al's hearing it for the first time. Al, his whole demeanor shifts. He goes from like just kind of hanging back, relaxing to like, boom, elbows on the table, eyes get big, and he's like, I don't know what you guys are up to, but I'd love to see it on the bench. I'll give you everything I got. And I'm like, I'm looking under the table. I'm like, did you bring something in with you that I didn't see? Like, what's everything? And he says, no, you don't understand. 2 years ago, I had this idea to do something similar with a business partner. And we just couldn't get on the same page with all of it. And it just kind of, faded away. So I'll bring everything to the table that I've got. And I'm like, well, we need what he's got because he knows the event space. Mm. I'm like, okay, but I still don't, I'm missing it. Like, what was the catch? He's like, oh, well, we were trying to bring Gary Vaynerchuck to Syracuse. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, gonna bring Gary V to Syracuse. I'm like, okay, I don't know how much, but I'm pretty sure we're probably not going to pull out our checkbooks today and split his speaking fee in thirds and say like, hey, Gary, we'd like to have you come to Syracuse to the On Center and do a gig for us. So how do we get there? And this is where we very quickly saw the strengths of each of us. And John the Wizard comes in and he's like, you know what? Gary just started this thing called Empathy Wines like 6 months ago. And we all already knew the Gary V backstory. So like, okay. And John says, let's see if we can flip Gary's hustle backwards and let's barter for the speaking fee. And I'm like, okay. And Al's down for anything. And John's like, I'll hammer him on social media until we get some sort of response.
And I feel like knowing Gary V, he probably appreciated that you did that.
Sure did.
And that is exactly what John said. He's like, look, we're not going to piss him off. He's going to appreciate the hustle. Well, what's the worst he's going to do? Not answer us? And I'm like, yeah, whatever. So John did his thing. And at 2,000 bottles, we get the attention of the team there. So the team of Empathy Wines and Vayner Speaks. And so John gets the message one day and asking for a phone call. And so we have the chat, and John pitched a hell of a story and said, here's the vision. He clarified my vision better than I could, and he gave it to him. And they were like, okay, but we got to talk to Gary. Yeah. And I'm thinking, they're never going to call us back again. And I don't know, what was it, 3 or 4 days later, John? Maybe a week at the most.
Wow.
Where they said, hey, we need to jump on a call again. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So I think we were all a little surprised and taken back. So we jump on this call, and these guys are no nonsense. They are very like direct and to the point. Mm-hmm. And they're like, look, good news. Gary's in, but I'm like, oh, here it comes. I think number one was you guys are a few bottles shy on the barter content. So that's when they told us we had to go from whatever John's last offer. I think it was 2,000, John, right?
I think they answered at 3,000, and then we settled on 5.
So 5,000 bottles of Empathy Wine we had to move that. We are now, I think, like around Thanksgiving-ish, somewhere in there. And so their next part was, we want Gary's brother AJ to come and speak as well. We will not charge you anything extra for that. And then it was, you need to meet certain parameters of the wine purchases by certain deadlines. And the first one was the end of December. And he says, and you cannot use Gary's name or any pictures of him on social media. And that was basically our skin in the game. Like, we don't know you buffoons from upstate New York from anything. Let's see what you got.
So basically, this is such an interesting story because Gary V, you used his wine company kind of not against him, but used it as another way to get to him. So, and you sold how many bottles of wine in December in order to get to that first deadline?
$25,000 worth.
Yeah.
Wow.
In like, I don't know, a couple weeks, something like that.
3-4 weeks.
Because we had no choice. I mean, it was like,
Sink or swim.
yeah. I mean, that was do or die situation.
What's up next for NoBull? So you have the NoBull digital workshop coming up September 17th. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, John can speak extremely well to this, but the NoBull digital workshop is basically sort of a pivot and an added bonus, because our conference was supposed to be on September 17th, and due to the culture and COVID and all that stuff, we did the right thing by the public and said, this isn't going to happen. We need to push it to next year, but we're going to add a big event. We're going to add a big virtual digital event for free. And that's really John's, brainchild there. So John, you can kind of elaborate on that.
Yeah, as Al said, we didn't have to, but we made the choice to push back our live event, NoBull 2020, to April 8th of next year. But we also didn't want to, we had sold a quarter of the tickets already for the live event, and we wanted to make sure that, number one, our brand stays relevant, and we didn't want to just push the event back. And then it, essentially was like 9 months, 10 months or whatever. Yeah. At the time that we made the decision. I don't know, maybe not quite that long, but whatever. We pushed it back. It was a long time.
Long enough.
So, long enough for people to forget. And at the same time, we had been getting requests from people, hey, are you going to have a virtual event? What are you going to do with your space? Like, all these virtual events are happening. And that was something very early on we talked about, was to have a virtual event if we couldn't have the live event. We decided real quick we didn't want to just turn it into a virtual event. So instead, we pushed it back, and then decided to have this virtual event on the same exact date, with a different strategy. So instead of having it be more of like, you go to an event, you get super motivated. Yes, you get tactical advice, but it's more of a experience. We wanted this to be more like what Rob initially wanted, which is tactical advice. So we're essentially going to have real business builders teaching a course on something that they're really, really strong at. So inbound marketing. So this isn't going to be me talking about inbound marketing because I have a marketing company. This is going to be somebody who's built a $100 million company using inbound marketing. So these are going to be CEOs and founders and executive members of these massive companies or successful companies, teaching the most important parts of running a business: inbound marketing, culture, leadership, funding. We'll have people actually teaching, handouts and takeaways in more of a webinar format, and it will be for free. And the ticket holders for NoBull 2020 will get a super secret special VIP lesson that will be announced sometime.
Good to know, because I am a ticket holder. So
you will get access.
I'm excited to find out what that's going to be.
VIP member.
Yeah.
And you probably will work the event because we need you.
I'll be there. Now, so what is the long-term vision for NoBull? You want to make this like the South by Southwest, right, of the Northeast?
It's evolved. So the event, yes. When we first met, it still is. So NoBull 2020, NoBull 2021, NoBull 2022, NoBull, and forever until the world explodes. We want to be similar to the South by Southwest conference, which grew over 34 years into this 10-day long cultural explosion of conferences and festivals. We want to do the same thing, but have it be more of a business track, right? So we'll cover life and business because that's our brand, but we want it to be more of a business track. That has spawned into what is the NoBull Company, which is much more like a entrepreneur magazine or Forbes magazine or Inc. magazine. Like they started out as physical magazines, but now if you look at them, they're full-blown media companies. They have a website, they have podcasts, they have video shows. So Vice, that's the other one. So Vice is a very successful modern day media company. We want to turn the NoBull Company into a business-focused modern day media company that also has events. Definitely listen to our podcast. It is our baby right now. It's called I'm a Little Buzzed. Kind of a play on words between we share cups of coffee if it's in the morning, a glass of whiskey or wine or whatever if it's in the evening, and buzzed on life and business, just energetic. We're blending humor and energy and life into business. So we interview CEOs and founders of companies and business builders and brand builders and influencers and people who are building great things and want to talk about it and share about balancing that with life. We have that, and we go on the air on Facebook and YouTube in video format and all the major podcasting platforms Tuesdays and Thursdays at 8:30 p.m.
Check it out. I have the link below. You can go directly to them and see that. It's a great podcast and you learn a lot. So
I do actually get buzzed, and you can hear it towards the end. Or
we've had the founders of Iconic, which is a very successful, basically a social media and socially driven art company. So they take, I would say culturally driven. They take kind of cultural trends and icons and they create art. Very successful. So we had the founders of Iconic on. We've had Marlon Nichols, who is a venture capital co-founder, investing in really successful companies like Gimlet Media, which is a podcasting production company. I think they actually just got bought by some major media company for a lot of dollars. So we've had Marlon on. We've had Francesca Martinez as an influencer. She's got 215,000 followers in the fitness space. And we have a lot of really exciting upcoming that we can't announce yet guests over the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned for those.
The founder of Chesty clothing company. So a lot of cool people.
Awesome. Now, my final question for you all is, how do you define success?
So I think it's super individualized. It's not a blanket statement that I can say what success means, but I can say what success means for me. One thing that it should mean is happiness. Like that should be the first thing that everybody should gauge their success.
Al's mad. You stole his thing.
Oh, sorry, Al. Sorry, Al. No, so Al says happiness, and then I add another layer onto that because for me, I still need to have some sense of progress in my life. And so there's not a moment when I've become successful. I'm successful if I'm happy and I'm moving forward in life. Like those two things make me successful, regardless of how much money I make or how much freedom I have or how many clients I get or any of that stuff. If I'm happy and I'm progressing in whatever it is I'm working on, then I'm successful.
For us, it's continuing to live out our unique family ID. It's that we are giving and serving for the fact of giving and serving without worry of what's in it for us, because we know by giving and serving to enough of the right people that it always comes around full circle. And as soon as we steer away from that, we become unsuccessful.
And I'm going to piggyback off what John said, because I couldn't agree more. And I think it is progress. And I would go as far as to say is that happiness equals progress, and having the idea in your mind always of a compelling future, and growing. Like if you're growing and it's clear that you're growing, then that's success, in my opinion. Like you are growing and you're evolving. Because if you're not growing, you're dead. And that's like from a biological standpoint, from a mental standpoint, from an every standpoint. Like if you're not growing, there's only one other option, and that is you're dead. So if you're growing, that is success.
Love it. Really 3 great answers throughout this whole thing. Thank you so much for giving us some insight into what each of you do and also what NoBull is all about. Check out NoBull digital workshop, September 17th. I'll have the link and information for that below. The I'm a Little Buzz podcast information is also below. And thank you again, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Danielle,
Thank
so
you.
much.
And
Enjoyed
thank you
Appreciate
so and thank you so much to our viewers for watching. Voices for Impact is on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And please follow and like us to stay connected. And I'll see you next time on Voices for Impact. Bye.